This is GLPBC 2012, home to the Raw Feed live and rapid-fire topic discussions. You can listen to our shows via live stream by navigating your browser to godlikeproductions.com, or you can listen to our archives located at podcast.godlikeproductions.com. You can also find us on iTunes. GLPBC shows now in its third year are produced in our live web-based auditorium where listener interaction and participation is encouraged. We are raw, uncensored, where humans from around the globe can discuss, debate, learn, laugh, cry, get angry, and to speak freely about concerns and issues that affect us all. Join Phenomenon, Ragman, Hubnuts, JDO, Jay, 2342, Kingman, Art, Osiris, ISIS 7, Yobo, Discus, and Libertine in BC, because GLPBC, like a poker hand, gives it to you straight. Enjoy the show.
Good evening to everyone in the auditorium, those of you listening on the live streams, all of you that download on iTunes. Welcome to GLPBC's The Raw Feed, live, courtesy of godlikeproductions.com. It's Thursday, April 26, 2012. And to talk to us tonight and share about her story, her book, and her words is Susan Lindauer. Miss Lindauer, born 17th July 1963, is an American journalist, author, and anti-war activist. As a U.S. intelligence asset, Susan covered anti-terrorism at the Iraqi embassy in New York from 1996 up to the invasion in 2003. Independent sources have confirmed that she gave advance warning about the 9/11 attacks. Shortly after requesting to testify before Congress about successful elements of pre-war intelligence, Lindauer was arrested on the Patriot Act, accused of warning White House officials that war with Iraq would have catastrophic consequences. She was subjected to 1 year in prison on a Texas military base without a trial or hearing. After 5 years of indictment without a conviction or guilty plea, the Justice Department dismissed all charges 5 days before President Barack Obama's inauguration. Susan Lindauer is the first CIA asset to have spoken out under her own name and for the record on Israeli complicity in 9/11, the controlled demolition of the World Trade Center, and the specific detailed foreknowledge of the time, target, and means of the 9/11 attacks held throughout the months prior to 9/11 by the CIA and in general, and Lindauer's CIA handler, Richard Fuse. She has also exposed her first-hand knowledge of pre-war intelligence and negotiations showing that Iraq was willing to give the U.S. anything it asked, and that the war was therefore, from the perspective of U.S. interests, not only utterly unnecessarily, but wildly counterproductive. Lindauer's evidence points strongly to 9/11 be a coup d'etat by hardline Zionists determined to steer the U.S. into a self-destructive war on Israel's enemies. Susan's book, Extreme Prejudice, The Terrifying Story of the Patriot Act and the Cover-Ups of 9/11 in Iraq, relates to her ordeal facing secret charges and secret evidence on the Patriot Act and the shocking conditions of her imprisonment on a Texas military base without a trial, threatened with indefinite detention and forcible drugging. You can find out more about Susan and her book at extremeprediceusa.wordpress.com. Before we begin, we ask that you, the members, be respectful and not mic up unless cued to by the show's hosts, VC Mods, or its producers. Any mic abuse will result in expulsion from the auditorium. Please limit your text chatting to questions only for our guests, which we'll address in the last segment of our show. Our host for this evening is our man, 2342. VC Mods Kung Fu, Kingman Art, Jay, and Yobo will be helping out in the auditorium. ISIS will be taking your text questions, and taking your mic questions is our very own Phenomenon. And as always, your podcast engineer is Hubnuts. Happy birthday. And now, the man that is so extreme that when he wakes up in the morning, he eats the Patriot Act for breakfast. Our host tonight, 2342.
Thanks a lot, Rags. I appreciate it. I actually do eat the Patriot Act for breakfast, and it has less calories than this new NDAA totalitarian bill that passed. So, but we'll get on that later. Susan, thanks a lot for making it out tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I think it's great if you eat it for breakfast. I hope you chomp it up and spit it out.
Hey, we've got a room full of excited listeners, And I really just want to compliment the book that you wrote on the reviews that I read on it. I mean, it had like 58 reviews on Amazon, and it got 4.5 out of 5 stars. So, people really enjoy your book that you put together, and I know that you're spreading the word around the country right now. I was wondering if, first off, if you could tell us what got you into the CIA. I know that it's very difficult for somebody to get on with the CIA. They have to go through multiple tests and interviews, and just to even make it to the interview process is very difficult. So, how did you get involved with the CIA, and what was it like?
Well, I'll tell you something. My experience was like to jump to the head of the class, ahead of everybody. I had my coming into this business was not the normal route. I was a lifelong anti-war activist. In college, I went to Smith College and the London School of Economics, and I was a radical leftist, which should really surprise you. I passionately opposed the CIA wars in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua. I campaigned throughout my college years against the apartheid in South Africa and against all U.S. military interventions in Central America, and the torture squads, the death squads, the harassment of intellectuals and activists. I would have been the last person in the world that anybody would have thought would end up as a CIA asset. What happened to me was, and some of this is classified, but I can tell you parts of it. I in fact gave advance warning about the 1993 World Trade Center attack. That was the very first attack on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor. And when I did it, now I know a lot of you will say, well, gosh, that was an internal FBI investigation. The FBI had uncovered this attack, and you would be correct. They had infiltrated it. They provided technical support for it. That is absolutely true. However, it is also true that it was a genuine terrorist conspiracy. This was Ramzi Youssef and Sheikh Abdurrahman, who were conspiring to overthrow Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. And so both facts in this situation, in the 1993 World Trade Center attack, both situations were true. It was infiltrated, and it was a real terrorist attack. And the part of what I knew about it, because at that time I was not yet a CIA asset, the part that I knew was the real part of the conspiracy. So I did not know. I mean, in my book, there have been a couple of questions. Others have said, well, in your book you don't talk about the FBI infiltration. That's because that's not the part of it that I was connected to. The part of it that I was exposed to was the real threat. And so I went and took that information to the Tunisian embassy in Washington, D.C., and I had no idea that I was just this do-gooder, this very young, I was 29 years old, trying to make the world a better place, kind of somewhat naive, I have to admit. But it was the delusions of youth, the hubris of youth, believing you can change the world and wanting to be totally committed to making this a better place. To this day, I've taken a lot of blows and a lot of beatings for being anti-war and anti-violence. But I, to this day, believe strongly in negotiations, dialogue, communications, exchange, cultural exchange as the best way to stop violence. Because if you build relationships with people, they stop being afraid of you. I just came back from a trip to Lebanon. And in Lebanon, I'm just going to tell you, for 10 years, I couldn't go to Lebanon because my countries were Iraq and Libya, and I was part of negotiating the Lockerbie trial. I started talks for the Lockerbie trial with Libya's diplomats. I did that myself, overseen by my CIA and Defense Intelligence handlers. So I was the person in the room, but then U.S. intelligence was monitoring every single thing I did. And we had meetings about every 3 weeks. But the point was that, in fact, Libya had nothing to do with Lockerbie, the bombing of Pan Am 103. That was a Lebanese and Syrian operation. So through this whole time, I was seriously persona non grata in Lebanon. I would have been, there were a couple of people who really wanted to see me dead in Lebanon, and they were tied to Hezbollah. And so it was interesting because this trip I just took last month to Lebanon, I was a guest of Hezbollah. And I was like, oh my goodness, 10 years ago you guys wanted to kill me. And now we're talking to each other. And I'm like at this great hotel, and the Iranian ambassador walks by, and I'm like, oh, I want to meet this man. And they're like, no. I'm like, oh, please. So I know where the Iranian ambassador hangs out now.
Nice.
But I've just had this incredible life. I'm not afraid. And part of my experience comes from the fact that I'm not afraid of people who are different. I'm not afraid to have a conversation with them. I'm not threatened by them. It's funny because in my court case to show you how ridiculous the Patriot Act is and how dangerous it is, when I was under indictment, a lot of stories were written about me that I was very paranoid and frightened, as if I was, frightened of life, and I'm not. I am exactly the opposite. I'm almost, my second attorney after Carswell, after my release from prison, I got a new, very high-powered Washington attorney, and he said that he thought it was the most ridiculous charge because anybody who's dealing with Libya and Iraq is doubtfully afraid of anything, and I'm not. I went into the bad parts of Beirut. I was like wandering around down where I was trying to figure out where the hostages would have been held in Lebanon and all this stuff. And they're like, "You didn't go into that neighborhood, did you?" And I was like, "Oh yes, oh yes, I did."
So you're a big fan of Rambo then? Hey,
no, not Rambo. No. I'm like a peace Rambo. I don't believe in killing people who you disagree with.
Like a peaceful Rambo. You just had
a peaceful Rambo. I'm not somebody who's going to go and destroy something just because it's something unusual or different. I'm not afraid of people who are different.
Well, that's
and
good.
So that's got its good and its bad, I think. But it's
that's great. I mean, that's wonderful. And one of the things that I was reading about you was that with the Patriot Act that passed, you were actually the first American that was arrested under the Patriot Act, and they blamed you or they claimed that you were some type of Iraqi agent, and then they doctored up the charges. Basically, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I was actually the second non-Arab American after Jose Padilla. And poor Jose Padilla. I grieve for that man. The war on terrorism has resulted in hysterical prosecutions for the stupidest reasons. Now, of course, if you commit murder, that's bad. If you rob a bank, that's bad. If there are certain types of crimes that you shouldn't do, that anybody know, beating people, stealing from people, identity theft, those are really genuine awful crimes. But the Patriot Act has allowed prosecutions for things that are very dubious. I was accused of taking what happened was I had taken a trip to Baghdad, and the government decided that they needed an excuse to prosecute me, and so they used my trip to Baghdad as ammunition. Well, it just so happens that I had given the CIA and the White House. My cousin was the chief of staff to George Bush. I apologize. Please forgive me. That's the only thing I ever have to apologize for, is that my family worked for George Bush. But he was Andy Card, who leaned into whisper into George Bush's ear on the morning of 9/11 that the second airplane had hit the the World Trade Center, and George Bush was reading the book upside down to the children.
Right,
and Andy Card leans down and whispers in his ear, "That's my cousin," and he's a bastard. Since we can say these words he's a professional hitman for the Republican Party, and he's the bad side of the Republican Party because he's the crooked side. I realize there are good Democrats and bad Democrats. There are good Republicans and bad Republicans. This guy is, anybody who's going to lie to a grand jury is a bad guy. I don't care if you're my family member. You know, I don't ask anybody to lie for me. You better not lie against me. And that's what he did. And that to me is just as dirty as if you're talking about taking somebody's freedom and taking their reputation, and I was arrested 30 days after I requested to testify on Capitol Hill. And we actually have, thanks to the Patriot Act, guys, thank you, Patriot Act, thank you, FBI, we have 28,000 phone calls. We have we have the original wiretaps. So I have tape recordings of my phone calls to Senator Trent Lott's office. And it was about a month before my arrest. I called Senator Trent Lott and Senator John McCain's offices. They were the gatekeepers. Now, for those of you who know Bradley Manning's story, again, poor Bradley Manning, I am so sympathetic with him. He's about to have a major hearing this week on whether he should be court-martialed. And this is the actual court-martial will be in, I think, August. However, they're filing a petition to drop some of the charges, and I hope that they do it. And we're going to talk tonight please let's come back and talk about Bradley Manning, because I don't want to get off on him right now, but he's very, very important. While he went public and went to WikiLeaks, I did it the proper way. Okay? And I'm with Bradley Manning. I'm not against Bradley Manning, but just so you know, I did it the way you're supposed to do it. So people say, why did you go to Trent Lott? Goodness gracious. Why did you go to John McCain? Ew, yuck. Didn't you know they were against you? Well, that is the proper channel. And that's why I did it. And, and so 30 days later, I'm thinking to myself, hey, I'm going to get to testify on Capitol Hill. And I'm feeling this great energy. And one morning, about 30 days later, I wake up and there's FBI agents pounding on my front door with an arrest warrant. And they're like, you're under arrest on the Patriot Act. And I'm like, you can't do this to me. Why? Why are you arresting me? I was like, do you have the right house? I was like, why? And they're like, I remember the FBI agent's hand was shaking. He was shaking. He said, well, your attorney will explain it to you later on. And I said, my attorney will explain it to me? I said, I looked at the rundown of the charges, and the bottom line, and this is scary stuff, 25 years in prison. And I'm looking at that, and my eyes are getting bigger and bigger, and I'm like, you're telling me I'm going to go to prison for 25 years, and you can't even tell me why?
Jeez.
You can't even tell me why I'm going to go to prison? My attorney will explain it to me later on. I mean, if you're a bank robber, if you're a murderer, you shouldn't murder people. You shouldn't rob banks. Okay. Identity theft. But seriously, I took a trip to Baghdad, and therefore I'm going to go to prison for 25 years? Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?
After they arrested you, didn't they also threaten you with indefinite detention and forcibly try to drug you as well?
Yeah, this was very, very frightening. The worse the war, yes, that is absolutely true. First, I was released on bail, and I had a $500,000 bail. And to be honest with you, for the first 17 months, I had no court appearances, not even one. And then two things happened. I was told during this period that if I kept this was also two things were going on. This was 6 months before the 9/11 Commission was going to issue its report. I was arrested. Sorry. I was arrested 6 months before the 9/11 Commission was going to issue its report, and I offered to waive my Fifth Amendment rights so I could testify before the 9/11 Commission. And my attorney was like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea." And I said, "No, the people of New York need to know what I have to say, and there is no way that I could be damaged by telling people the truth. They need to hear this, and I'm willing to take the risks, and they can ask me anything they want." And that's how confident I was that I had done nothing really wrong. And so I challenged them right away. It's like, "I'll testify. I'll waive my Fifth Amendment rights. I'll testify. You can ask me anything you want under oath in a congressional inquiry because the people need to hear this." And then the other thing that I had was the Iraqi peace option. There was a peace framework on the table that would have resolved the entire conflict. We had weapons inspections, which went beautifully well. My team negotiated the weapons inspections. I did this supervised by the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency. This was entirely appropriate because even though I realize your audience won't like the CIA, I realize that. But it is appropriate for the CIA to take control of situations where the United States needs to control the agenda. And as long as we're doing it for peace, better to have somebody like me get in there and try to work out a really great, strong, solid, rock-solid peace framework, which is what we did. We had weapons inspections. Before 9/11, we had the Iraqis agreed to allow the FBI to send a task force into Baghdad with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations and make arrests. They also, after 9/11, offered to give the United States financial documents on Al-Qaeda, which would have pinpointed where, ironically, tragic irony, where the finances were in Afghanistan, so that we could have fought that war more effectively. We could have won that war. We could have shut down the Taliban's financial pipeline. And George Bush wouldn't take it. So George Bush compromised us on both wars. And the tragedy is the corporate media refuses to cover this story and therefore has robbed the American people of the better ability to make good, stronger, more educated assessments of what these politicians in Washington are doing. Some of the Democrats are good, some of the Democrats are bad. Some of the Republicans are good, some of the Republicans are bad. I'm not going to try to tell you who to vote for, but I'm going to tell you that we got a lot of crooks in Washington. And that you should believe.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, this is really important, and there's a lot of different speculations out there on who exactly was behind 9/11 as far as the global players go. People have said it was, Israel was involved, London was involved, little clips and TV shows and movies prior to 9/11 happening, like the Lone Gunman TV series, portrayed 9/11 happening 6 months before it did. If you type in Q33 NYC in your computer and then change the font to Windings, it'll show the Twin Towers, the sign of Israel, and an explosion, and then and an airplane, which is quite ironic because Q33 was actually one of the flights that hit the towers. And a lot of people have said it could have been something from some type of weapon technology that is directed energy weapons. People have said possibly thermite was found, controlled nukes.
Thermite was found. I don't want to downgrade Judy Wood's theory because it was obviously a military-grade weapon that was used. But 9/11, let me walk you. I can walk you through this fairly quickly, and remember what I'm telling you about the Iraqi peace framework and all the stuff that's going on right at that time. It's important to know that at the end of the Clinton administration, by about a year before 9/11. By about August, September, the CIA I hated the sanctions on Iraq. Sanctions on Iraq killed 2 million human beings, 1 million children under the age of 5. The World Health Organization has documented it. The corporate media has tried to silence this. The only weapon of mass destruction inside Iraq was the United Nations sanctions. It was a tragedy. a horrible, hideous thing. We wiped out literacy in a single generation. Most Americans don't know that Iraq performed the second heart transplant in the world. They had the finest hospitals prior to the United Nations sanctions, the finest hospitals that rivaled London, Washington, Los Angeles, New York, and Baghdad, of all things. Saddam Hussein had a very secular society. He was determined to be a counterbalance to Iran. Isn't that ironic? Here we're so afraid of Iran, and we have created a government that is an Iraqi government that is now hugely friendly, partnering up with Iran. What a mistake. What a horrible mistake. Though I oppose war with Iran as well. I am opposed to war in Iran. But even so, it was such a huge mistake. But you have, so anyway, at the end of the Clinton administration, I'm coming back to this, sorry. At the end of the Clinton administration, you see that sanctions are collapsing. The CIA decides they're going to have to take control of the situation, which is a good thing, and I'm there to do it, and I want to do it. So we begin negotiating a peace framework. The White House is being told about the peace framework on an ongoing basis. And they are being told over and over again that the international community loathes sanctions. There is no way to renegotiate the sanctions. Colin Powell tries to present a smart sanctions policy that is doomed to failure. So the CIA is bracing the Bush administration. They're going to have to let go of the sanctions. They're going to have to get the best deal possible for the United States. And and Baghdad, meanwhile, is agreeing to every single thing the United States asks for, including that the United States will have special priority contracts in the following areas: telecommunications, that's satellite, phone, computers, internet, everything. Special priority contracts in healthcare, hospital equipment, and pharmaceuticals. Those are things produced by the United States. Also, special priority contracts in factory construction for non-dual use, non-military purposes, and special priority contracts in transportation. Iraq offers to buy 1 million American-manufactured automobiles every year for 10 years. Okay, everything we ask for, the Iraqis agree to. There's nothing that, if there was, and one more thing that will surprise you. While I'm in Baghdad, Iraq proposes this itself, that they would accept the return of the Iraqi exiles to be housed at expanded embassy compounds protected by embassy security. They would have the right to, they would have the right to form political parties and have opposition newspapers, opposition media, campaign events. So all of this is going on, and it's very positive. And so the CIA is pushing for a solution that's going to be major peace. In the middle of this, in April, okay, so all that is going on, and it's all very, very positive. The world is racing to a conclusion where the sanctions are going to collapse, and even though the United States has killed 2 million people, we're going to come out on top. I know that's unfair. It's unfair, but it's the way the CIA operates. So, we had the United States, and I'll tell you something, guys, in this audience, the United States used to be preeminent. It used to be that if you wanted to get something for yourself, you'd better take care of the United States and what we wanted, and that's unfair, and I realize that this is for international members of the audience, you'll cringe to hear that, but it's true. And there's, 10 years ago, the world was a different place. We could dictate what we wanted, and you'd pretty much have to give it to us. So this was a situation where Iraq was real politics. And it was not. I deny that it was appeasement of Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was going to retire to a villa, and he was going to phase out his government. And within 18 months, there was going to be free elections, and the Iraqi exiles were going to come into power. in the middle of this, in April of 2001, sorry to give you that background. In April of 2001, I get a phone call. My CIA handler tells me that he's got a message. I am the back channel to Iraq at the United Nations. That is my job. This is my function and my role. And so I exist, and Baghdad knows it. Baghdad wants to receive these messages. When the United States needs to say something privately that it's not going to say in the public domain, it's not going to say on CNN, it needs to say it privately, they say it through me. So I go, and he says, I have a message for you to take to New York, and I need you to leave right away. So come see me, and then go up to New York. I do exactly what he says. I go to his office. He says, this is April of 2001. He says, Susan, we are looking for any intelligence on a conspiracy involving airplane hijackings and or airplane bombings. We want you to go to New York and tell Libya and Iraq, and at that point, only the first time, only in April, he talked about Libya, because I had both countries. So he said, I want you to pass a message to these guys that if they discover, and Iraq particularly, if they discover any intelligence about this conspiracy, and if they fail to give it to us, then we shall declare war on, or we will bomb, sorry, he didn't say war first. He said, we will bomb Iraq harder than they've ever been bombed before. They've never been trashed like we're going to get them now. And at this stage, they'd done so many awful things to Iraq, it was hard to imagine doing anything worse than you've already done. It was very hard to communicate that you're going to bomb them again. Oh, great. Okay. You've bombed them a zillion times. You're going to do it again. So he was really trying to say, this is going to hurt you in a way you've never been hurt before. And that's hard to imagine in 2001. Okay. So, but I go up to New York and I say to the Iraqis, we're having a very cordial conversation about the peace framework. They're giving us everything we want. So I say to them, hey, need you to pass a message back to Baghdad. Please send a cable. We're looking for intelligence on an airplane conspiracy, hijacking conspiracy. And if you hear anything, let me know. Please, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. And I fully expect them to comply. I go back to Washington. Richard says, come see me. I want to hear what you said when you threatened them. And I go to Iraq and I go to Richard. I say, well, I didn't really threaten them. I didn't threaten them. I just asked them to get the stuff for us if they have it, and I'm sure they will. And he said, now I'm going to swear. Okay, to everybody, hold on, cover your ears. Cover your ears. God damn it, you stupid fucking bitch. I didn't tell you to be nice to these people. Tell those goddamn sand niggers, sorry, tell those blankety that they goddamn well better give us the blankety. See what I mean? It's like...
Wow.
Wow.
Sand niggers. You've never heard that expression, have you? You're gonna hear like, is everybody like purple right now? Like, oh.
No, I think I just peed my pants.
You've never heard that expression before?
Oh no, I know. No, I have. It's just I wasn't expecting that of you, honey. I thought I was the only one with a Teamster mouth. This is fucking awesome.
Well, you told me I could. You told me I could be honest.
No, sweetie, believe me, this is great. It really is. It is great. Let it rip. Just like a burrito fart. Just let it rip, honey.
Yeah, okay. Well, he really did. I've never seen him so angry. My CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuse, stormed around his office screaming obscenities at the Iraqis. And I was like, hey, Richard, I'll go back and deliver the message. And he said, yeah, that's right. You tell those MFers. And he's like going on. He's going on about the towel heads and the sand niggers. And again, if there's the Arabs out in your audience, then I'm sorry. But that's what he said. I'm being honest with you. And I'm being really blunt. He was emphatic. And he said, you tell them that the threat this is very important. The threat does not come from you or I. It does not come from the CIA. You tell them this threat originates at the highest levels of the government, above the CIA director and above the Secretary of State. That was the exact expression I was told to use. And because I was an asset and because I was trained in back-channel diplomacy to do it, I would use exactly the word. I knew that if they told me to use a certain type of language, I would use that language exactly. And so that's what I did. And there are only 3 people. Let me point this out to your audience for those of you who don't know. There's only 3 people in America who are higher than the CIA director and the Secretary of State. That would be President George Bush, Vice President Richard Cheney, and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. And I say to you now, in May of 2001, that message was communicated to the Iraqi government through my back channel, and I know it because I did it. I am not retelling you what somebody else did. I'm telling you what I was instructed to do and the words that I was told to speak, the words that came out of my own mouth. I was told to threaten them with that they would be bombed worse than they'd ever been bombed before. They would be bombed back to the Stone Age if they didn't give us this intelligence. Now, Iraq's reaction, after I had been so nice the first time, they were like, my diplomatic contact was like, oh, Susan, wow, okay. Well, he was very worried, and he said, well, listen, Baghdad, and check this out, Baghdad has already agreed to allow the FBI to send a task force into Iraq with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations and make arrests. They had done this after the USS Cole in October of 2000. I can tell you exactly why we did it. One of the conspirators in the USS Cole had been in Iraq. He was not hiding. He was in Iraq. He was a Saudi national, and the Iraqi government had discovered his participation in this conspiracy. However they did it, phone records, surveillance. Saddam Hussein tracked Islamic jihadis mercilessly and obsessively. He believed that all Islamic radicals, all Islamic fundamentalists would become radicals, that they would go through a process of conversion. If you were an Islamic conservative, you would become a radical, and you would become a jihadi, and you would try to overthrow his government, and try to set, and playing on the poverty, the alienation from the central authority. They believed that the government could not control the whole territory, and they were partially right. So they would go into Iraq and try to set up these, and Saddam was obsessive that he would not allow them to destabilize his country. So he would track them down, and then as soon as they started to do anything, he'd throw them out of the country and deport them. And so but the problem was when he'd discover a conspiracy, he was supposed to tell us about it. And in this case, he discovered the conspiracy of the bombing of the port of Aden, which we all know as the USS Cole. And so Saddam passed that information through my back channel, and the CIA responded in October of 2000 by saying, well, you know what, if you guys cannot control your borders, you need to let us send the FBI in, or Interpol, or Scotland Yard. Somebody needs to go in there because we do not want you to make arrests. We do not want Iraq arresting foreign nationals. We agree you cannot do it, but you have to let us do it. So by February of 2001, Baghdad has agreed. And in May of 2001, when I issue the threats against Baghdad, Baghdad's response is, why don't you send in the FBI? If you believe there's a major terrorist conspiracy involving airplane hijackings or airplane bombings, why don't you just send in the FBI and we'll cooperate and you can see whatever you can find here. That was their immediate response. Okay? Throughout the summer, June, July, August, my CIA handler and I spoke about 9/11 a lot. Apparently, I also told civilian friends that we believed there would be an attack in late summer, early fall. And I was very emphatic. I told my friends to state that who had family in New York City, in Connecticut, that they should stay out of New York City, that their families should stay out of New York City, because we expected something and that we were tracking it and we were trying to get information about it. In June and July, I had a next door neighbor moving in. I remember they had a moving truck outside their house, and I remember being on the phone with my defense intelligence handler, kind of half laughing about it, which makes me kind of sick to my heart now. But we were saying, we were talking about how they would feel if they knew that we were talking about a major terrorist attack on the United States involving airplane hijacking from the strike on the World Trade Center. And what would they think if they knew their next door neighbor was this CIA asset working in anti-terrorism? And I joked that they'd probably want to go back wherever they came from. They probably wouldn't want to move in next door if they knew who I was. But then 2 months later, this is July, the beginning of July, and so, but by September, of course, what happens is it's not funny at all, but we would get on the phone because my phones are tapped, and they've always been tapped, and we know they're tapped. And we would say things like, NSA, hello NSA, pick up the phone. We're here talking about a real, genuine, authentic terrorist attack on the United States. We are expecting airplane hijackings and a strike on the World Trade Center. We need you to cooperate and help us. Send, alert other teams that they need to be tracking this. And we would talk about this on the phone in that way. And my defense intelligence handler would get on the phone and say, this is not a hoax. Susan's laughing because I have kind of that way about me. I'm very adventurous and spirited, I guess. And he's like, this is not a hoax. She means it. We're serious. And he'd be like, I'm with the Defense Intelligence Agency. We mean it. There's going to be an attack. Pay attention. Wake up. You've been tapping our phone for years trying to get this information. Here it is. Get it.
Let me interject for just a minute if I can.
There's
a lot of various. That's okay. That's good stuff. I just wanted to bring up when I asked you earlier about if you had evidence or any intel on what actually caused the Twin Towers to collapse. First time in history that buildings like that would actually collapse within their own footprint, unless it was some type of controlled demolition. And then if you look at the map of downtown New York, and you look at where Tower 7 is, it's actually behind towers. Let me just double check here. I was looking at the map earlier. Towers 6 and Towers 5, yet somehow 1 and 2 collapsed within their own footprint, and then Tower number 7, which is actually behind Tower number 6, collapsed within its own footprint too, and just some tiny debris actually made contact with Tower 7. So it's quite amazing that these well-structured and fortified buildings would collapse like that. And the official story is these fake these boogeymans, these Muslim extremists came over here from these caves, and they caused these planes to crash perfectly into the towers, and then the Pentagon they were able to crash it perfectly into the Pentagon. And a lot of research has pointed out that it was actually a missile that hit the Pentagon, and that it could have been remote controlled airplanes, or if the planes that did hit the towers, there was also some type of controlled demolition as well. So has the information and the intel that you have, since you were on the inside at least, and you've had a lot of connections with people in high places?
Let me just, this is a really good question, and thank you for focusing me. I appreciate that. I consider that 9/11 was like a magician's trick. I believe, and I just know from how this, we call it a cover and deception operation. It's like a magician's trick. On the left hand, you see the airplanes flying into the building, and all of your attention is on that. That's where you're making eye contact. But the real action is on the right, and that is a controlled demolition of the buildings. And I absolutely believe that both of them happened. And I remember having a great interview with Kevin Barrett when this first came out, and he's like, but Susan, it's impossible for both of them to happen. And I was like, oh, no, not at all. Because you see, what happened is every crime, any kind of crime, requires two things, motive and opportunity. A police officer will tell you without a motive, without an opportunity, even a serial killer who's, scouting out a crazy serial killer who's scouting out somebody, he's planning this out with precision. And that's what it took. It took precision planning. But they had 6 months to do it. And they'd already decided, so they had opportunity because they had 6 months of at least advanced knowledge of this attack. And then they had motive because they had already decided that if they achieved maximum destruction, they were going to go into Iraq. Then you have this fact. Mohammed Atta and all those guys are not jihadis. They drink, they smoke, they go to strip clubs. Real jihadis don't do that. Trust me. Really and truly, you can take my word for it. Never in this lifetime. A true, devout Muslim would never do those type of activities. Because, so how do we account for Mohammed Atta? Mohammed Atta is a CIA asset, just like me. He is a CIA asset. And the others, a number of the others whose names escape me at the moment, they are also, they're informants. They are placed inside the operation to monitor it, to supervise it, to provide technical guidance. And they probably, in my opinion, because I've studied terrorism before for a long time, we know that most terrorists in these kind of operations, they don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Only the ringleader usually knows the full scope of the operation, and he gives directions and the others trust him and take it on faith. But they probably were given I believe, that given their relationships to the CIA and probably the Mossad as well, they were probably given the coordinates to plug into what do you call it? There's a correct terminology for it. It is a Boeing uninterruptible autopilot framework. Okay? It can be programmed from the ground, or it is designed by Boeing in every airplane that if there is a hijacking, the pilot hits a button and they can stop the plane from being diverted to any other route. It will continue. Once it's programmed with coordinates, you hit this Boeing uninterruptible autopilot and it will fly wherever it's told to fly. And so if the hijackers got into the cockpit, they would, if somebody gave them the coordinates and said, here, plug in these coordinates and hit the autopilot, and then you're done. What they would not know is that it cannot be stopped. So once their CIA coordinator or somebody, we won't say who, I won't speculate who, has given them the coordinates to hit for the World Trade Center, and they hit the autopilot, Mohammed Atta may never have known what he was going to strike. He may not have known at all. And then all of a sudden he sees the World Trade Center head. He's like, holy Christ, holy Muhammad, what is going to happen now? Allahu Akbar, this is not what we thought. And then he tries to take off the autopilot, it would be impossible. Even if the terrorists, if the hijackers thought they could remove the autopilot, they couldn't. It would be impossible. So they may have been told what to do without ever realizing what the outcome would be. And I think that's very likely. Very, very likely. I don't think for a minute that they knew they were going to die that day. I don't believe it.
Now, yeah, that would make sense if there was some type of, system where they could fly the planes with a remote control and they had no idea.
Well, no, it's not remote. Sorry, it's not remote control. It's autopilot.
Right,
It's
right.
every single airplane has it. Every single airplane has an autopilot system, and you plug in the coordinates, and let's just say you're going to Washington. You think you're flying a plane to Washington. You're a CIA asset. You've been asked to infiltrate a hijacking conspiracy. You know that on the other end of it, somebody's going to get you out of it, and that you think you're there. You've been role playing this thing, and you think you're in there because you're going to stop everybody else from dying. You're going to save the day at the very end, and you're not going to go to prison because the CIA knows what you're doing. You're the quote good guys. You've infiltrated this thing, and your team handler gives you coordinates, and they just happen, but you don't know what the coordinates are. You're just taking it on faith that the coordinates are going to take you where you're supposed to go, which is Washington, and then you're going to land in Washington National Airport, and somebody's going to be there for you. And so you think you're going to Washington. You think you're going south. And then all of a sudden you see the World Trade Center ahead of you. You don't even know that it's going to come up on your radar. That is what I think happened. I don't think they had a slightest clue what was going to hit them. I don't think they knew.
So it was like
I don't think they knew.
It was programmed prior.
They were told what to do. Yeah, they were told the cord. It would be very easy. You see, it's a very easy thing to do. Just give them the coordinates. They trust you. You're their handler. They plug in the coordinates. They hit the autopilot. Little do they know that it's an uninterruptible autopilot. So when they see the World Trade Center ahead, there's nothing they can do. They just slam right into it.
Right.
It's too late.
Right.
That's what I think happened. But I could, but I do not believe, having gone through that long saga, I'm sorry, I do not believe for a minute that the airplanes brought down the buildings because they knew, not for a minute. We do know that thermatic dust, this is just a fact, David Ray Griffin has written about this a lot. Thermatic dust was found on the site. I was actually in prison with a woman from Japan, and she had been at the World Trade. She had an apartment across from the World Trade Center, and the glass broke. When the combustion, the implosion broke the glass, and dust came into her apartment, and she gathered up the dust, and she took the dust. She was wealthy. She had means. So she took the dust to a scientist, like a laboratory, and said, I want you to figure out what this is. And she took it to a lab in upstate New York, and she also took it back with her to Japan and took, like a significant portion of dust with her to Japan. And the FBI came and arrested her. They came and arrested her and confiscated her dust. Now, isn't that interesting? They confiscate the dust, and they remove her so that she cannot tell that she has found out that it is thermatic dust. So I learned about thermatic dust in prison, with a bunkmate, a cellmate, who's like, you think you got a crazy story, listen to mine. And I'm like, wow, you have a crazy story.
Wow. And so that was probably the same thing then with Tower 7 then, right? I mean, it probably had some type of, And the Pentagon. And also, I think,
I think the Pentagon, I think, was a missile. I don't think there was an airplane there. But the Tower 7, I've also heard now, I could be wrong about this, but I was just at a talk in Los Angeles, and someone came up to me and said that Tower 6 or Tower 5, one of the smaller towers, also went down. So there was actually 4 towers that went down, she said. She said there was a 4th one.
I'm sorry, the Liberty Plaza, and then the Millennium Hilton, and there are several other ones, yes, correct. But the interesting thing about Tower 7 is, compared to where 1 and 2 are, it's like something actually skipped Towers 6 and 5 and was able to cause that to collapse like that. So it would completely bunk the story of debris from Towers 1 and 2 completely.
Yeah,
so they certainly have to explain that.
Absolutely, it does, and it's really funny, if you could call it funny, that they're giving that the I guess it was the I'm going to say it was the BBC, and please sorry if I'm wrong, I think it was BBC, gave a stand-up interview saying, "Oh, Tower 7 has fallen down," and in the window right behind them is Tower 7. And 30 minutes before Tower 7 falls, the BBC gives a story announcing that it has already fallen.
Right.
And they've been told this by the government, that the Building 7 has fallen as well, and it hasn't even collapsed yet. Hasn't been demolished yet.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. That's insane.
Yeah.
And what's even more insane than that is they actually, came out with the different TV shows and different subliminal messages that it was going to happen prior to it happening, like the Lone Gunman episode that showed a very similar event. And even in one of the cartoons, I think it was Johnny Rocket, in a particular scene that several months before the event happened, they showed a scene very similar to that. So, and if you've done the research, I'm sure you know this, and a lot of people in here do, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the military will actually give tons of resources to these Hollywood blockbuster, producers in exchange for letting them help write the script or add certain things in so they can control their propaganda machine. And, I remember how when this happened back in 2001, I was, prior to that happening, there was a lot of stuff on the news about Osama bin Laden, and you'd see those, those extreme Muslims running across flying across the monkey bars with their, AK-47 strapped on their back and their, their big turbans and stuff like that. And, so it's like they were getting people ready for this fake boogeyman, to go after Osama bin Laden, in these caves in Afghanistan. Or is it somebody else? Let's go after, this boogeyman in Pakistan. Well, let's go after somebody in Yemen. So they've been able to, use it as an excuse to go wherever they want and do whatever they want. And the Patriot Act, as totalitarian as that bill is, some of these newer bills that have passed make the Patriot Act look like, suspended
the Patriot Act or something. The Patriot Act is a scary, scary, scary law. That has got to be one of the most frightening things ever drafted. For those of you who don't know this, the Patriot Act was 7,000 pages that was pulled out of a drawer. And people have wondered, why could they pull it out of a drawer right after 9/11 where it was already written and everything? That is because it copies thousands of pages from the Soviet Criminal Code of 1926. And the Soviet Criminal Code is also the basis for the Nazi enabling, they called them enabling laws, of 1934. So you have the Soviet Code, which is the precursor to the Nazi Code, and of course people get really offended and say, well, the Patriot Act is, don't compare that to the Nazis. I realize the Nazis are special. They're special, awful people. However, the Soviet Criminal Code and the Patriot Act are almost identical. And do we really want to have the KGB? Homeland Security is based on the KGB.
Speaking of that, I mean, how do you like the fact now? Sorry, I just wanted to bring this up because you're talking about the KGB. Sure. We're going to let Russian military in the United States to run counterterrorism drills. And now with this NDAA bill that's passed, anybody in America can be considered a domestic terrorist. I mean, do you pay for anything with cash? Do you believe in the Constitution? Do you ever text somebody privately in a public place? Do you have a shorthand radio? Do you have a Ron Paul sticker? Are you a returning veteran? Do you believe in freedom of religion?
A returning veteran all of those is now a threat.
Classify you as a domestic terrorist now, and now they're going to let Russians in and other foreign troops to work in conjunction for terrorist drills. So what are they going to do? Are they going to say, oh, well, these guys are domestic terrorists, so let's go round them up because maybe people in the American military won't be as apt to go lock somebody up that's their own people. You know what I mean? So I was warned about this stuff 20 years ago, that they were going to start bringing foreign troops into the U.S. and using them to round people up. And that way, when someone saying, hey, why are you locking me up? They're not even going to be able to understand them because they speak Ukrainian or they speak Chinese. Yeah.
Well, the frightening thing is that you are absolutely right. We are losing our country. The government is taking our country. I don't know if losing it is the right way. I would have thought even 6 months ago that we were more, even when I heard about the NDAA, and I've been through that. I lived through military detention. We've got to talk about that now. There's a good segue into it. But even then, I thought that 2012 would be more vigorous, that there would be more active debate since this is a presidential election year, and there's sort of a disconnect. Maybe it's because the Republican primary season went on for so long. But I feel like we're all kind of drifting. And I expected 2012 to be a year of fire and brimstone, where the voters were going to speak up and really shove it back at the politicians. And instead it's like we're going out without a whimper. There's a few, there's no offense against your audience, but there's a few who are whimpering, but I feel like a few who are speaking up, but I feel like it's becoming more silenced, more toned down.
Well,
and even in November and December, we were passionate. And where's our passion going, ladies and gentlemen? What's happening? We have got to fight for our country right this moment. And if we don't, it's speak now or forever hold your peace, because the freedom of this country, they're ripping it away from us.
Well, yeah, they've raised the levels of the fluoride in the water. They're blasting the skies with aluminum and other nasty chemicals. They're doing everything they can to lobotomize people. They're boasting a vaccine called the Funvax that actually attacks a particular gene in your frontal lobes that basically lobotomizes you. And they say they're going to spread it with nanotechnology and flu viruses and cold viruses. This was actually a Pentagon video back in 2005, so who knows how long they've been doing that. And, I'm glad you brought up the protesting thing, too. This Occupy Wall Street fiasco where nobody really knew what they were protesting for, and it was being, controlled at the very top levels by the actual dungeon masters who wanted to take us down. They didn't really have a cause.
But at least they were doing something.
They were doing something, but unfortunately what they were doing had really no effect except for to bring in this new bill that they passed, this anti-trespass bill, which is basically an anti-protest bill, where now if 2 or more people are protesting in a place of government where government employees need to get into work, and if they basically block their access to work or cause them to be late or any type of problems, now you can get up to 10 years in prison for protesting. So you can get more time in prison now for protesting than you can for going after somebody with a gun for armed robbery. It's insanity, and you're right. The connections of now and fascism in Germany and the gulags in the Soviet Union, it's going on right now. I'm sure you know about the Christmas ornament of Mao in the White House Christmas tree in 2008 after they boasted flying the Chinese flag close to the White House and lighting up the Empire State Building red for the Chinese Republic. So it seems like we've already kind of sold out in many ways at these top levels. And, these contracts were given to China now in Afghanistan after we've taken over, a lot of space out there. What do you do to, get the word out there to people that are so mind controlled from all the fluoride and TV and, just everything that's made them so docile? Can you wake people up? Or is it?
Well, I'll tell you something. What I find is that people, when they hear my story, first of all, it's interesting because referring back to the first comment you made, which I really loved, which is that my book has gotten great reviews, but it's also gotten hit by the trolls. And so it does occasionally, there are a few, on Amazon, there are a few reviews that you can just see were written by trolls. And that's, but they're all but 90% of them are great reviews, and I'm very, very happy. People, when they hear my story, whether they are libertarian, whether they are progressive, whether they're conservative or evangelical, Americans who care about this country are rightly upset. Whatever your political stripe, whether you are a 9/11 truther or whether you're a peace activist who's upset about the war in Iraq, people say to themselves, my God, what is going on? we're in worse condition than we realize. And I think that's why my story is so important, because it's waking people up. It is the most extreme violence that you could do to somebody, is to arrest them, to silence them. I was held for 5 years. First I was free, but then they decided that they needed to get me out of the way. The Democrats were launching their own inquiry. The 9/11 Commission report was under attack. So those things were happening. You know, they had the first they arrested me to shut me up, and they said, "Well, just keep your mouth shut and we'll drop the charges." But then the war started going badly. The voters started to get really, really, really angry. They started to all sorts of other things were going on, and now they needed to really shut me up because they were talking about impeaching George Bush. Remember the impeachment debate? Well, as soon as they started talking about impeachment, they started saying, we got to get rid of the Susan Lindauer. She's a troublemaker. She is going to talk. We can't take her to trial because she refused to give us a guilty plea. We can't take her to trial because, you know, we can't get a conviction because this is so stupid. There's no evidence, people. There's no evidence. You know, they made accusations. You can make accusations on paper. You can write anything. You can write any word you want on a piece of paper. The question is, can you take it to a jury? And the answer was not a chance in hell could they sell that to a jury. They had 3 receipts totaling $92.92. And this was supposed to convict me. There was no evidence that I got $10,000 from the Iraqis. That was dumb. There was evidence that I had an Iraqi agent in the Mukhabarat who was going to help the FBI task force identify terrorists moving around the country. Who entered the country, when, where they were staying, what they were doing. See, I did nuts and bolts practical anti-terrorism work where you take the big speech, the policy speech, and you translate it into action that can actually be implemented in the society. And so that was my role. And again, some of you may really hate that I did that, and I understand that, but I'm telling you the facts of what happened. And so we had a Mukhabarat agent who was going to help me with this. I got indicted for that. They called that, quote, conspiracy with Iraqi intelligence service. Gosh, do you think a jury would convict me of that? If I were to explain that I had recruited a foreign agent to help the CIA, do you really think a jury's going to convict me? No, I really don't think so. And I think that we could bring a couple of witnesses from the CIA to say, yeah, that would have been really great. Yeah, that would have been very helpful. Yeah, you know, I don't know why you've indicted her for that, because it's really a good thing that she did it. And if we're serious about terrorism, this is how it gets done. And the thing is, what I found was that the politicians have no clue. They're giving speeches. They're going out and using these buzzwords, patriotism, national security. Oh, I get to talk tough and sound like I'm doing something for America, and CNN is calling for guest interviews, and I look, you know, the flag is flying in the breeze on my campaign, and I'm speaking for national security, and they don't have a clue how this work happens, how it gets done. At a field level, they're dumb. They're dumb as posts. If you speak to them and try to communicate with them, they're like, I don't understand. Don't tell me this. I actually got into trouble for telling them that money was being stolen off the black budgets. Black budgets are not audited by Congress. Congress does not want to know how the money is spent. This is very significant because it pertains to surveillance. What's happening, to jump from 9/11 to Iraq and over to the surveillance culture, back to the Patriot Act. Sorry, guys. It's a long way to come. But we're spending.
This is good.
Okay. Well, we're spending $75 billion a year on domestic surveillance, and that money is being
out through their dishwashers that you plug into the internet. So pretty soon, if you do one load of dishes a day and you're a part of the peasant class, then they'll send a SWAT team to your house and make
Yeah. That's right, but here's the thing. The $75 billion is not audited because it's black budget money. What they're doing is they're giving it to private corporations, and they're hiring private It's not the government that's watching you. It's a private corporation that is collecting your data. A private corporation. Pardon me. Let me explain something. Sorry. This is really important. It's a private corporation that's listening to your phone calls, reading your emails, and they are not subject to any oversight or auditing, whether it's financial auditing or activities auditing. So they can do anything that they want to you without any controls from the government, from Congress. So Congress has exempted itself. And the other thing that you need to know is that only the Constitution, the Constitution only applies to the government. So search and seizures, warrants, things like that only apply to government agencies. But if you have a corporation do it, a corporation doesn't have to have a wiretap for you. A corporation that can go into your house without any trouble at all, because the Constitution, under the new rules, only applies to government activities.
Right.
And so a corporation could enter your house and do anything they want to you.
Just wanted to add one thing to that. Not only can corporations from America do that, and they do that, but there's also foreign corporations that can do the same thing. There was an article I read the other day about how China has more information on American citizens than a lot of intelligence agencies from the U.S. do.
Yes. And it means that Israel can do it too. And people don't like to say the Israel word. Talking about Israel in Washington is poison. It's political suicide. They don't like to hear the words, Israel is supposed to be this saintly country that is the pure democracy. No democracy is as great as Israel's democracy. Bullshit. Sorry. No. We're talking about a government that has apartheid. If you're a Jewish person in Israel, you're treated very well. But if you're a Palestinian person or an Arab person or some kind of indigenous person who is not Jewish or American, they probably are very nice to Americans, but they're not even nice to the Ethiopians. They're not nice to the Russians. The Russian Jews have wanted to go back to Russia at the end of it. They're very unhappy. And so, there's an apartheid system going on there. And they have two different sets of rules and two different sets of civil rights. And a lot of what's happening at the NDAA level, they're already doing in Israel, and they call it administrative detention. And you can go through administrative detention for 3 to 4 years. It's endless. And having been through that myself, I was in it. Now I'll talk about the Patriot Act here. I was locked up on Carswell Air Force Base. When the government decided they needed to get me out of the way because the war was going badly, there was talk of impeachment, I was suddenly ordered. I went from being on bail. I was suddenly ordered to surrender to prison. I was given 3 days. No, let me rephrase that. I was told that if I demanded a hearing, I would be seized immediately. But if I agreed to surrender to the prison voluntarily, I would have 3 days to get my affairs in order. Having had no advance warning that I was even going to be forced to surrender to prison at all, I agreed. I had no choice. They told me that if I was taken into custody, I would surrender my bail till the end of the proceedings. But if I agreed to cooperate, I could surrender for a prison psychiatric evaluation. Originally, they said that under the federal law, it is in fact you're only allowed to hold someone for 4 months, 120 days maximum. And after 120 days, if you are not a threat to yourself or others in any way, you cannot be violent towards property, persons, or yourself, then you must be released from prison. So my public defender attorney, who cut the deal without my knowledge or consent, behind my back in the dark of night, said, oh, gee, this is a really great solution. Then we can save the federal government for national security reasons. I was like, why would I want to do that, idiot? I don't want to save the government for national security. And they're like, well, if you don't go along with us, then you're going to lose your bail forever. But if you do go along with us, then you'll have 3 days to get your affairs in order. And the judge amended it to 10 days. Once I was locked up, however, they refused to release me. And they fought to have indefinite detention for up to 10 years with no trial or hearing. And while I was there, once I was inside, not only did they refuse to release me, but they demanded, it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. They demanded the right to forcibly drug me with Haldol, Ativan, and Prozac, 3 of the most potent drugs on the market. Haldol is a rhinoceros tranquilizer that shuts down motor functioning and imitates the effects of Parkinson's disease. It's a horrible drug. It's a lobotomy drug. It chemically lobotomizes you. And when you add in Ativan, which is a mood, like a stress anxiety control, and at that point I was feeling fairly stressed out, but I never did that. I never took any of these drugs. And I protested that I don't suffer from depression. Even in regular life, I just don't suffer from depression. But this was all about destroying my credibility, destroying my reputation. Those of you who are Christians or atheists, you will, whichever way you're on, you will be amused to know, it's funny, that I was accused of being a religious maniac, which I think is just the most extraordinary thing in life itself. Now, I do believe in God, and I know there are people out there who are atheists, and you don't believe in God. I am not like you. I do believe in God. I have a strong faith. To me, the world is a beautiful place. It's a magnificent earth. I love our earth. And to me, I'm more of like if I see God as like an earth mother kind of thing. I suppose. I mean, I'm not evangelical, but I just see the beauty, the magnificence of this planet and the world and life and consciousness and everything. And I have a very spiritual life. But to say that somebody who's spiritual lacks responsibility, I mean, wow. But they wanted to make up they had to invent something. And unfortunately, the corporate media went along with it, and they pretended that, and it was a lie. I want this known. It was a lie. And if you have any questions about this, I'm willing to answer them. I'm not going to be offended if you do have questions, so it's okay. If you want to ask me something, I'm not going to be bothered by it. But they made up a story that 6 psychiatrists had said I was incompetent. That was not true. Even Carswell testified that they saw no evidence of hallucinations, no hallucinations, no depression. I was pleasant, cooperative, smiling, good eye contact, cogent in my conversations. They saw no symptoms of anything except mild neuroses. Another psychiatrist tried to say that I suffered from paranoia and grandiosity because I believed that people, regular people, can make a difference on this planet, and we can change things. We can have an impact on the world. Now, this is very important because the diagnosis of paranoia, which is nonsense. My attorney my second attorney after Carswell just ate them alive for this because he's like, she's dealing with Libya and Iraq. How can you say she's paranoid? Somebody who's dealing with Libya and Iraq is probably not afraid of anything. And so this is just ridiculous. You made up a story. But the diagnosis of paranoia and grandiosity for the purpose of change is something from Soviet psychiatry in the Cold War. Right up until Gorbachev was, right up until 1988 is when it fell. 1/3 of all intellectuals and dissidents who got into trouble with the Soviet government, 1/3 of them were sent to mental institutions. And they were accused of two things, paranoia and grandiosity. And the Soviet psychiatrists declared that it would show up in regular life as a mild neuroses. So the Soviet psychiatrists acknowledged that there would be no symptoms of any kind in the intellectual's behavior, except for the fact that they were a little bit nervous because they were being held in prison. Gee, do you think that'll scare you a little bit? But they said, yeah, we admit that there's nothing there, but that's because we're catching it early before it can develop into a full-blown disease. So even though they're not showing, even though they're not showing any symptoms, it's going to come later on. We're catching it now. And so they would dope them up with Haldol and, Thorazine and electroshock.
They love you.
Oh my God.
They just want you to be okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. That's disgusting. I mean, that is absolutely disgusting that, they send you on jobs and they turn you into a patsy. Then they want to drug you up. It's wicked. It's really wicked.
And it's all to protect politicians who want to lie to you about 9/11 in Iraq and the war on terrorism, and they all want to pretend to be something they're not. They want to pretend that they're accomplishing great deeds. They're fighting dragons for America. That's what I imagine them doing, like little children pretending to fight dragons. Now, I like dragons. For all of you who are dragon lovers, I'm a dragon lover too. But I mean, it's like these kids have made up a story that they're accomplishing a lot more than they really are. In reality, guys, before 9/11, in the whole wide world, there were 200 to 300 terrorists everywhere, on every continent, 300 people. You couldn't fill a small auditorium with 300 people. Well, I don't know, maybe a small high school auditorium. Think about it. I don't know how big your room is right now, but if you look around that room where you're at, I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I don't know. But 300 people you're going to disrupt the entire, that's for every country. And those are people who want to attack the United States or attack Europe. Now, there were more people who wanted to attack Israel, but I'm talking about people who would attack the West, who would attack the United States or Britain or France or Germany or someplace like that. It's just nonsense. It was very elite, very exclusive, very small numbers. There is no reason to sacrifice your civil rights. There's no benefit to it. It's far more expensive and costly to do it this way than to do it the other way, because you can contain 200 people. 300 people, you can watch them, you find them, you target them, and they are defiant. They are, like Abu Nidal launched 200 missions. Abu Nidal bombed Abu Nidal bombed airliners, he bombed embassies, he had the Achille Lauro, I believe, was one of his. He attacked a lot of, like, El Al Airlines was often his target, an Israeli airlines, but he also attacked Northwest Airlines. These guys were predictable in what they do, and you don't have to follow every Islamic person on the planet. They are not the enemy. They're only 200 people we're talking about. This is just ridiculous. This is dumb. It's a huge waste of resources.
I saw a video the other day of these kids that got blown up in a drone attack, and they were still partially put together, and they were still alive. And this one kid, his jaw was blown off, and then this other kid, his legs were blown off. And I'm thinking, I can clearly understand that there needs to be security for the United States of America. I mean, there's no question about that. But when you start blowing people up that have nothing to do with, what really happened, and you're supposedly going over there for something that's made up. It's absolutely disgusting, and I don't know how people sleep at night that do that kind of stuff. I really don't.
Well, the drones, the horrible thing is like a video game. It's like you don't have to confront the death and the suffering. You don't have to see, they take a picture of a site and then send in they have like scouter planes, and then they send somebody in, and 30 minutes later there's a wedding party there. It's a playground, and there's children are out of school, and there's children everywhere. That's how this is happening, and China is taking a totally different approach. China is building community infrastructure. They will go into Africa or the Middle East or South America. They're doing a lot of work in South America and Africa because there's a lot of resources there, and they want to. So what they do is they build a school, they build a community hospital, they build a road, they send engineers, they send teachers. They have a huge population. They need to do something with their population. They have educated people. So they send in human resources to try to build up what's in that community so that the locals, the indigenous population, will be stronger, and then they can trade. What a concept.
China, I was just going to say, China really worries me. I think that they're doing everything they can to infiltrate all systems of governments, not only in the U.S., but around the world. I mean, they've put multiple microchips. Actually, I read an article the other day, 59,000 faulty microchips were installed into different defense systems, missile systems, drones, jets, intel hubs that were made in China. And they found out that these chips can actually send back keylogs of information to the Chinese government, and they can be shut down and built. So that there's been drones flying over the Middle East, and they've been just falling out of the skies, and they've also been sending back coordinates to what the article said was an undisclosed location. But there's a really good chance that undisclosed location was China. So I mean, even the Jericho TV series that was out years ago, where it was a TV show about Civil War. And there was these false flag nuclear bombs that went off in several different states in the U.S. and they blamed it on the fake boogeyman. But when everybody was trying to figure out what was going on, the Chinese were actually flying in supplies. So with all of this military complex intertwined with Hollywood, aka Hollywood complex, where they intertwine all this subliminal messaging, it really appears that either China and the U.S. are completely in conjunction with each other, or we've basically sold out to the Chinese already. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you, I am very frightened of China. Having just come back from Lebanon, I'll just tell you what they say. They now these are people who the people I was talking with were Hezbollah. Okay, so Hezbollah, which does not like the United States, they are moderate Arabs, but they have a long history of standing with Syria and Iran, and they fought Israel for 15 years. So we consider a lot of these people terrorists. Not that they are not, but we consider that we question that when we hear the word Hezbollah, it kind of raises you just kind of jump a little bit. Now they said that China is triumphing over the United States, and they are happy to see the United States go. That the world is so disgusted with Iraq and Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo and the phony liberation philosophy. It's like they're not even thinking about what China means or what it does or what it is. They're not thinking about the impact or the quality of decision making or how China, the environmental controls in China or lack thereof, the quality of food controls, like if they're putting poison into baby milk,
melamine,
or
baby
poison
formula.
into pet food, baby formula, or they're watering down something with chemicals, some bad killer chemicals. They don't even, in places like Lebanon, they don't even care. All they see is that somebody is big enough to take on the United States. And somebody's knocking the United States down, and they're happy to see, honest to God, they're happy to see the United States fall. We are about to get jumped. If we don't, and this is the thing that why this 2012 election is so important. I don't know what the answer is, if it's Obama or Romney, or if there's a third party, how do we save our country? But we have got to do it right this moment. We cannot be passive. We have got to somehow demand that these leaders listen to us and take us seriously, and we've got to figure out a way to restore our economy and to restore our preeminence, because we are falling, and when we fall, we're going down, and they're going to be, I'm telling you, the boots are out. They've got the spike heel boots. The steel toe boots are on, and when we go down, they're going to kick us to death. We are not going to get back up again.
Now, another thing that worries me too is a lot of the F-35s and the F-22s, over $1 trillion worth of aviation is grounded right now in an article I read the other day because of some faulty sensors that when they get over a certain altitude, that the pilots start blacking out. And I wonder if those sensors actually come from China as well. So, how easy would it be for them if they actually do have access to all of our infrastructure, military, systems to shut them down with all these chips? There was an article I read the other day about how every single all the electronics now that are from China could actually be at risk. So your iPhone, your smartphone, where you're texting your friends, and all that information is going not only to the NSA, but it's also going to the Chinese equivalent of the NSA. So, how close are we? And do you think that is why they're passing all these bills? And this also another thing I wanted to bring up. I'm sure you're aware of it. March 16th, the administration signed into law peacetime martial law bill, which makes all transportation the government. It makes labor. So basically they could take an individual and say, hey, look, we're going to make you work here for 12 hours. You're going to get paid this much. If you have a business, all of your supplies now are ours. If you have a home, your home can now be used for us for national security purposes. We can tell you where to go, what to do, how long to do it. And this is, happening very fast. It's like
listen.
Yeah.
Food production in your backyard. Like if you have like a little garden, the government has if you have solar panels on your house, if you have anything the government wants, under this new peacetime martial law, I couldn't believe it when I read it. I did read that law because I was so horrified. And they were like, the government can go in and take anything they want. If you're a farm, it'll be really bad in the Midwest if you have a cow or a farm or some crops and the government wants it, they just are going to go in and take it. But if you have solar panels on your house, if you have a well, if you have water that they want, they're just going to go in and we've just decided it's ours now. We need it, we're taking it. And again, you've got to realize this is not a government that's doing it. It is and this is the weird thing that people don't get yet. The government is subcontracting to corporations, so it's actually corporations that are going to come in and take it.
Well,
and they're going to say the energy that we need is for the government, and we are contracted by the government to control you. And it's going to be the weirdest thing because people are not even expecting. What I'm saying to you right now is going to turn out to be very important because the Constitution only applies to the government's control of the people, but the government has found a way out of it where if they apply it to the corporations are exempt from all the restrictions that the government has to obey. It's going to turn out to be very important, but it's like it's a little bit too far ahead for everybody yet. But you're going to find out it's going to be very bad. But yeah, peacetime martial law, they can take your food production, anything they want. Your car, your transportation.
your boat, your motorcycle, anything, and then they can take you. I mean, that's what they can take you and tell you what to do. And maybe that's why they've opened up all of these, set up all these concentration camps, FEMA camps, happy camps, whatever you want to call them. They're all over the country now. Decommissioned military bases that have barbed wire fences that point inwards, not outwards. All these new bills are passed, and the additional 20,000 drones they're going to put out into the skies that have facial recognition, that are teamed up with non-lethal and lethal weapons. And if you're a domestic terrorist, can they shoot you? Can they shoot your family if they're with you because you're considered a domestic terrorist too? I don't know. But one of the things I would like to point out to people is back in World War II, the Japanese, the Germans, many of the Koreans were put into these concentration camps, and they were born in the United States. And if you guys think that can't happen again, you need to wake up or you need to slow down on the fluoride. We have some guest questions from our audience.
Absolutely, I'd love to answer questions.
All right, I'm going to turn the mic over to Art right now.
Hello there, Susan. I've been listening to this conversation, and
turn up your mic, Art. It's really quiet, buddy.
Oh, can you hear me a little better now?
If you could turn it up just a couple more notches, that'd be great.
All right. Well, why don't you talk for a second until I get it dialed in?
Okay, just a little bit more, Art, and I think we'll be good to go, man.
All right, that's about as best I can do.
I can hear you fine.
That should work.
Can you hear me? Okay. So the first guest that we have is Albino Rhino. And Albino has a series of questions. I'll feed them out one at a time. Albino Rhino would like to ask you what she knows of the CIA's use of something called MK Ultra.
Oh, I don't know. I hear about it. I hear what you hear, that they are exploring mind control issues, and I don't know very much about that. I'm sorry. That's not what you want to hear. I'm sorry about that. But I think it's probably true. I think it's probably true that they're testing it, because that's the kind of thing that they would explore. And they're capable of doing a lot of damage, a lot of damage, without really caring about the consequences.
Yeah, the next question also from Albino, he was wondering if you have gone through some kind of programming. I'm assuming maybe he thinks that MK Ultra got a hold of you and put a brain tuner in your head or something. Okay.
Well, I don't have any microchips. I actually take that seriously, that the government is now heavily trying to look for any excuse they can to microchip us. I think that's a very serious threat, a fascist threat. And it may not be MK Ultra, but it's equally as that may turn out, the microchips may turn out to be the vehicle for MK Ultra. And I don't know enough about MK Ultra to comment on it, but what I'm hearing about the microchip issue is that they have the ability to put something into your brain where they can affect your moods and affect your behavior and load you up with whatever information they want you to hear and take out anything they don't want you to hear.
Okay, very good. The next one also from Albino Rhino wants to know if you were exposed to the dark side of what they are into, that is, human trafficking and drugs. Also, a lot of her family works for high levels of government, and Albino Rhino wondered if she can trace her bloodline to one of the 13 Illuminati families. Which would be
I can.
Go ahead.
Oh, wow. Well, she may be able to trace her bloodline to the 13 Illuminati families. I cannot trace mine. But I can tell you that right now. Did I see the dark side of the CIA? Actually, Lockerbie was, I was involved in the Lockerbie talks, and my CIA handler had been in Lebanon during the hostage crisis in the 1980s. And the CIA infiltrated heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa Valley to get close to Islamic Jihad, which was the precursor to Hezbollah. And Pan Am 103 was shot out of the skies when a defense intelligence team reported to CIA headquarters in Washington that they thought that there was a double agent who was taking profits from the heroin trafficking in exchange for confiding secret information about when the hostage rescuers were getting close. So every time that they'd come down and get close to making a rescue, somehow the Islamic Jihad was getting tipped off, and they were moving the hostages right before they were going to be saved. And Terry Anderson, from the Associated Press journalist, was held for 7 years. Jerry Levin, the CNN bureau chief, was held for 3 years. Terry Waite, the Anglican emissary, was held for several years. There were 96 hostages in all, and this was not a pleasant kind of thing where you're just held for a few weeks. This was like the Colombians who have been holding hostages in the jungle. These people were chained up to a bucket in a room with a bucket to pee in, chained in a basement while bombs were falling over Lebanon, over Beirut. And bombs were crashing down around them, and it was a terrifying experience. They were trapped. For me, it was fascinating to visit Lebanon and go into Beirut. And I actually went into these neighborhoods where the hostages were held. But it was because of the heroin trafficking that Pan Am 103 was shot down, because the CIA team and Defense Intelligence team was flying back to Washington on Pan Am 103 to make a report on the corruption of the CIA and the CIA's involvement in supplying heroin throughout Europe and New York and into the United States. So they killed them off so that they could protect their heroin supplies and their drug profits. And we know, for example, that in Afghanistan we have American soldiers that are guarding opium fields. And they say that they can see opium poppies as far as the eye can see, up the mountains, down the mountains, and they are protecting it.
Okay. The next question, there's one more from Albino Reno, but I'll try to mix this. I'll put another one in from CM Punk. That's one of the guests here. His question for the guest is, you were declared mentally unfit to stand trial twice, once in 2006 and then again in 2008 by 2 different psychologists. And the question is, how do you test these claims?
Okay, that's a very good question. It was actually there was 2 different judges and 1 psychiatrist. Yeah. What was very interesting about it was the first judge was Michael Mukasey. Michael Mukasey, they both did it for different reasons. Michael Mukasey was hearing Larry Silverstein's insurance claims on the 9/11 attack. And it involved a couple $2 billion. And I kept going to Judge, when I was locked up in prison, I was very aggressive in writing letters to my judge demanding to have the right to call a hearing to challenge the incompetence finding. The government refused to grant me a hearing, and I said I was prepared to prove that I was an asset. I was very upset. I was very, very frightened. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever been through, and I demanded the right to prove that I was an asset. And he said, no. I said, we'll prove I was an asset. We'll prove I warned about 9/11. And that was the problem, was they absolutely depended on deniability, because Larry Silverstein wanted his money. And if I went into court and testified in front of the same judge who was giving this who was agreeing to give the money, who was forcing the insurance companies to pay Larry Silverstein, the insurance companies were fighting it. They didn't want to pay him. And most of the insurance companies were foreign. They were not domestic. So the insurance claims had been contracted out to foreigners. So these foreigners they sympathized with 9/11, but it's not their country. And so that's why they did it the first time. The second time, I had a different attorney. The first attorney was a public defender. and he said that he could not verify my story. The tragedy of that was that my uncle, my attorney was incompetent, and my uncle Ted Lindauer, when we saw that my attorney was totally falling down on the job, totally failing me, my Uncle Ted jumped in and very quickly interviewed my witnesses, confirmed the whole story. My witnesses were fantastic. I had the chief solicitor from the Lockerbie trial who won his case for his Libyan defendant, Mr. Fema. There were originally 2 Libyans who were accused in Lockerbie, and one of them was acquitted. And his attorney was my star witness. So this would have reopened the Lockerbie case and 9/11 and Iraq and the whole notion of, heroin trafficking by the CIA. It was going to be very ugly for the Justice Department, but I could prove every word of it. So they wouldn't even give me a hearing. Then the second time, the judge, her husband worked for Daddy Bush, and she was nominated to the appellate court. She was ultimately, George Bush, as a lame duck president, nominated her to the appellate court 6 days prior to the decision that she gave declaring that I was incompetent to stand trial. I was declared incompetent over the objections of my own attorney. I was declared incompetent over the objections of 6 psychiatrists. Now, this is very interesting because the White House propaganda always says that half a dozen psychiatrists declared me incompetent. But, in fact, what happened was they made the declaration that there were half a dozen psychiatrists against me. Then they tried to find somebody to make it true. And every single time I went in and had another evaluation, they said, hey, guys, we don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing wrong with this woman. She wants a trial. There's no reason she shouldn't have one. And so we racked up half a dozen in support of me. And it got so bad that I was so like gung-ho for it that I was like, I even challenged the court that if they demanded I would submit to a 3-day inpatient psych evaluation, which I never did. Never happened. But I was like so adamant about it that I was like, I'm not afraid of you. You can look at me, you can scrutinize me, you can watch me as long as you want. You can observe me 24 hours a day, and you're not going to find a damn thing wrong with me. And I'm not afraid of you. I'll face you. I'll meet you anywhere. You just, you lay down the challenge, I'll take it. And they couldn't do it. And that's interesting because they couldn't do it. So it was.
So you basically called them on their.
I called them over and over again on it, and 2 months after my case was dropped, I assisted to pay off my legal debts. I helped my second attorney, Brian Shaughnessy, file a brief to the United States Supreme Court on behalf of a different client. And so the client knew that my status, which was I had just been declared incompetent to stand trial. And my attorney's like, Susan, you got to help me with this because I need you to help. You got to help me do this so we can clear out your legal debts. And he's like, just come help me as paralegal. And he said, I need you. You're fine. And it was really actually very good for me because it got my confidence back. And he was like, Susan, what they said about you is just garbage. Come help me. And if I can do the Supreme Court, I can do the Southern District of New York.
Okay. We'll go back to Albino Rhino. This is another type of question, saying that you keep mentioning her handlers. What does the word mean to her? And then he has in there possibly MK Ultra handlers. So I guess what he's asking is, what do you mean by these individuals or what the handlers are?
Okay. Handlers are they are the official contacts at the agencies. I had a CIA handler and a Defense Intelligence handler, and they debrief you. They keep track of all your activities and who your contacts are and what's happening with those contacts, and they report them. They gather first-hand primary primary documentation of everything that's going on, and then they pass it up the food chain. So they're like one level removed from direct contact with the events. I am, as the asset, I am the primary source. I am the eyes and ears of human intelligence. So I am the one in the room who's going to engage in the conversations, who's going to try to influence the outcome of things, try to change what's going on. I loved, people get a little bit frustrated, not frustrated, but surprised to hear, I loved it. For me, it was a very positive thing because I was anti-war and anti-sanctions, and I wanted to do something to try to help solve these problems. So I was not covert, which is unusual. The Iraqis and the Libyans both knew right up from the first meeting what I wanted to do, which was to set up a back channel. And the purpose of my communications was dialogue with the pariah nations that were under sanctions. There was no official contacts because they were enemies of the United States. So I got to fulfill that role, and it was very exciting.
Oh, very good. Okay. Now we have Arthur Daly. That is another individual in the chat room. His question is, ask you about NDAA, whatever that means. I have no idea what NDAA is.
NDAA is the Military Detentions Bill. That is very scary. The NDAA makes the Patriot Act look like a good law. And the Patriot Act, as we said earlier, has secret charges, secret evidence, secret grand jury testimony. It allows indefinite detentions without a hearing, which is what I was subjected to. And that's a very, very, very scary law, where you're not even allowed, they can make accusations against you. You have no right to disprove the accusations. But the NDAA is even worse because the NDAA...
What do the letters stand for?
The National Defense Authorization Act.
Oh, okay. All right. Now
yeah.
I understand the question myself.
Okay, National Defense Authorization Act of 2002, it must be 2011 or 2012 because it was passed on, he signed it in, and it was, he signed it on New Year's Eve, December 31st. And it scorns the Constitution. People are allowed to be arrested with no charges at all. They have no right to go in front of a judge. They have no right to have there's still no hearing, but there's no judge. There's no charges. You can be picked up on the possibility that maybe sometime in the future you might commit a crime. And terrorism is now defined as sedition, and that's freedom of speech and freedom of criticizing the government. So, for example, what we're doing right now, this would be prosecutable because we're speaking against the government, or at least we'd be severely curtailing our speech to avoid criticizing the government. It's very scary. My uncle came to visit me to show you how terrible this is. My uncle came to visit me at Carswell Air Force Base, and this was before NDAA. This was just the Patriot Act. Carswell Air Force Base refused. My uncle traveled 700 miles in each direction, 1,400 miles round trip. Carswell Air Force Base refused to acknowledge that there was a prison on the military base. And they said, Susan Lindauer is not here. We don't know why you keep saying that she's here. And he said, well, he pulled out the judge's papers, and he said, well, I have a judge's order ordering her to come here, to surrender here. And I have letters from Susan. See, they're postmarked from your military base. And they said, oh, well, that's not possible. There's no prison here. She's not here. And my uncle said, well, I demand to speak with a commanding officer because you're wrong. And the commanding officer came out and looked him straight in the eye and said, sir, there is no, my junior officer was correct. There is no prison here. Leave our base right now. You have no business coming here. My uncle said, well, I'll go back and I'm going to talk to the judge because you're violating her rights to attorney counsel. And my uncle was also my attorney. He was trying to save me from my stupid public defender. And he was trying to get me out of Carswell. So this was a very important attorney visit. This was not just, he was a family member and an attorney. And so the second time he came back, they said, well, yeah, there's a prison here, but there are no visiting hours on the weekend. And meanwhile, all these other families were visiting their inmate daughters and sisters and wives. And so he watched them go right around him, and he said, but they're going in, and they just smiled at him and said, yeah, they are. You're not. And so at that point, he asked to see the commanding officer. He said, listen, you people should be court-martialed. You are violating the Constitution. You have no right to withhold Susan Lindauer for having an attorney visit. And he said, I'm going to go back and talk to the judge, and we're going to come back with the U.S. Marshals. And they said, will you just do that? He said, believe me, I will. And he went to the judge, and he said, I demand, you are violating Susan Lindauer's constitutional rights to a trial. This is a matter of habeas corpus. We demand that you call out the U.S. Marshals. And only on the third visit, when the U.S. Marshals were flanking him at the military base, there were several marshals there with him. Then and only then did they let him into the base. And it took U.S. Marshals standing right next to him. But you see, without NDAA, the thing about NDAA is we had a judge to go to. When the military started playing games of, there's no prison, she's not here, we went back to the judge. Under NDAA, you have none of that. You have no protections at all. It's the worst thing. It's terrible. Literally, American citizens are going to disappear out of their homes in the middle of the night, and they're going to be taken away to God knows where. Their families are going to have no right to know where they are, and they're just going to swoop down and take everybody. Sorry.
And we only have a few more minutes left. And then the
okay, I'm
podcast
sorry. I'm sorry.
Off. And so I think what we're going to do here, I don't have any more typed-in questions for you. I could say a few things on this subject, but in the interest of time, I'm going to switch it over to Fen. If there's any mic-up questions, I believe Fen has them. So take it away, Fen.
No, actually, I'm good, so I'm going to send the mic back to 23. 23, take us home.
All right. Thanks a lot. Well, Susan, I got to tell you, this has been a great couple of hours. I really appreciate you spending some time with us here and putting yourself on the line after you've actually been behind bars and firsthand what it's like to get taken by these goons. And I just wanted to say one thing before we close, as far as the microchips go, and the tracking of individuals. The technologies became so advanced now that they can make them smaller than a speck of dust, microchips that can not only track individuals, but can alter emotions and moods in the brain. So, and they brag about possibly spraying this stuff in the skies and saying that they're just transistors. But who knows how far they're going to go with these technologies. And all the way back in 2001, a lot of the world leaders got together and said, hey, we're going to usher in the age of transitions, which eliminates privacy, and it basically hooks everybody up to a computer system with microchips and into the brain. So let's hope that we can prevent that from happening by, at least waking people up and letting them know what's going on. And I got to say, it's been an absolute great time here tonight. Thank you for making it out. Hopefully we can have you again with us sometime.
I would love to come back on, and I hope that I hope that I answered your questions. And the Patriot Act, I hope you guys will read my book, Extreme Prejudice, The Terrifying Story of the Patriot Act and the Cover-Ups of 9/11 in Iraq, because believe it or not, we just scratched the surface. There's so much that we didn't even talk about the Patriot Act. It's so much worse than I'm even telling you now. And what I went through in Carswell and the forcible drugging of women who could not walk or speak or lift a cup to drink, who wet the bed at night, who couldn't shower by themselves. I mean, what I went through was a terrifying experience.
That's horrible. I'm so glad you made it out, and you've got incredible spirit. I mean, everybody in here has been commenting on how great your energy is, and I absolutely love it. So, thanks again. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead now and close out tonight's show by turning the mic over back to Rags.
All right, and Susan, please stay with us if you would.
Sure.
GLPVC's The Raw Feed would like to thank our guest and author, Susan Lindauer, for sharing her words and discussing her book, Extreme Prejudice, The Terrifying Story of the Patriot Act and the Cover-Ups of 9/11 and Iraq. Again, you can find out more about Susan and her book at extremepredudiceusa.wordpress.com. 2342, you are the man. Thank you for hosting, sir. To our VC team, JDO, Kung Fu Libertine, DS, Isis J, Cayman Art, and Yobo, we thank you so much. Hubnuts, as always, you are the sound master. And again, happy birthday, mate. And to our wonderful VC leader, Phenomenon, we thank you for making these shows happen for all of us in the GLP community. And next week's, folks, please join us here in GLPVC with another full week of great guests. Starting on Monday, April 30th, we have Bob Fletcher and his discussion on Sonny Bono's assassination. Tuesday, Dr. Bruce Goldberg and time travel. Wednesday, we have the one and only Jim Mars. And Thursday, we end the week with a doubleheader. First, Bob Bowman and Taking Back America at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Then at 11 p.m. Eastern, we have the man Rasa and Free Energy Devices. So please join us all next week here on GLP. That's it, peeps. The podcast will be up shortly. This is a GLP voice chat presentation in conjunction with GodlikeProductions.com. Have a great night, everyone.